Zinel was known in the village as a quiet, gentle soul, someone who always went out of her way to help others despite living modestly herself. She had grown up surrounded by the tall baobab trees and red earth of her homeland, her laughter often mingling with the calls of birds and the hum of village life. Yet, beneath her calm demeanor, a restless sadness lingered, a weight she carried in the cautious glances she received from neighbors and even family. The villagers whispered behind cupped hands, their voices low and sharp. Which, they said, cursed. Words that sliced deeper than any blade. They pointed to moments when crops withered unexpectedly or livestock fell ill, blaming the unseen hands of Zinel. It began with small suspicions, a broken pot here, an argument overheard there, but soon these little stories grew into legends. Zinel's kindness was met with suspicion. Her quiet moments of prayer were misunderstood as dark rituals. Children were warned not to play near her, and women avoided her in the market, crossing themselves when she passed. Even the village chief's own wife looked at Zinel with narrowed eyes, convinced that misfortune followed wherever she went. Despite the whispers, Zinel remained gentle, never raising her voice or fighting back. She tended to the sick with herbs and helped gather firewood for the elderly. Yet no kindness could shake the growing fear. One morning, as the sun spilled golden light over the clay rooftops, she overheard a group of villagers speaking harshly. She must be stopped before the curse spreads further, one hissed. Another nodded grimly, the elders must decide her fate. Zinel's heart tightened as she walked home, the weight of accusation pressing heavily on her shoulders. She wondered how fear could so quickly turn neighbors into enemies, and how the love she had once known seemed to fade with every passing day. The sun climbed higher, but a chill settled in her chest, a foreshadowing of the trials soon to come. The village of Ndumo lay nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where life followed the steady rhythm of seasons and the traditions of ancestors. But lately an unsettling tension gripped the community, spreading like wildfire through the narrow pathways and humble homes. It was not sickness nor drought that disturbed the villagers most, it was fear. Fear of the unknown, of curses whispered in the shadows, and above all, fear of Zinel. The whispers that once lingered in secret corners now roared openly in the marketplace and under the shade of the ancient fig tree. Mothers clutched their children tightly when she passed, and merchants averted their eyes, fearing her presence might invite disaster on their goods. The village's rich red soil, usually vibrant with crops and life, seemed duller, and the laughter of the children was tempered by caution. At the heart of Ndumo's unrest were the village elders, the keepers of wisdom and tradition. They met beneath the oldest baobab tree, its great limbs sprawling like the roots of their collective worry. The council consisted of 5 men and women, each chosen for their knowledge and guidance, but none immune to the growing dread. They spoke in hushed voices about recent misfortunes, the unexpected death of a goat, the withering of maize crops, and the mysterious illness that had taken the healer's apprentice. Each calamity was a thread in a tapestry of fear that led inexorably to Zinel. Elder Mosi, the oldest among them, was the first to voice what many dared not say aloud. "The signs are clear," he said, his voice cracking like dry earth. "There is dark magic at work here, and it walks among us in the form of our own neighbor, Zinel." The others murmured their agreement, their faces grave. Elder Cuddy, known for her sharp mind and fierce spirit, added, "We cannot allow fear to destroy our village. We must act to protect our people, even if it means difficult choices." The decision weighed heavily on them. They understood the gravity of condemning one of their own, especially a young woman who had never openly defied the community. Yet their duty was clear, to safeguard Ndumo from what they believed to be an evil lurking beneath the surface. A messenger was sent to fetch Zinel. When she appeared before the council, her eyes calm but weary, she felt the weight of countless gazes upon her. The elders presented their case, citing the village's recent woes and the growing unrest. Zinel listened silently as accusations filled the air, the words sharp and unforgiving. Despite her protests of innocence, the council remained unmoved. After hours of deliberation, Elder Mosi stood and declared, "For the safety of Ndumo, Zinel must undergo the trial of purification. She will be locked in the Chamber of Shadows, the old room beneath the granary where the dead rats lie. If she is innocent, she will emerge unharmed, cleansed by the spirits. If not, the curse will claim her." The villagers who had gathered outside the meeting place gasped, the name of the dreaded chamber sending chills down their spines. It was a place no one spoke of lightly, a test feared by all and a sentence dreaded even more. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red hues, Zinel was taken to the chamber. The door creaked closed behind her, sealing her fate. The The sounds of rats scurrying echoed in the darkness, and the foul smell of decay filled the air. Alone in the oppressive silence, Zinel steadied her breath and prayed for strength. Back in the village, the people waited with bated breath. Mothers clutched their children tighter, and men sharpened their spears, ready for whatever outcome might unfold. Some wept quietly, torn between hope and fear. Others muttered curses, certain that the darkness would prevail. The night stretched long and heavy, the village suspended between dread and anticipation. In the flickering glow of lanterns, the elders pondered what the morning would bring. Would Zinel return as a beacon of innocence or a harbinger of doom? As the first light of dawn crept over the hills, the heavy door to the Chamber of Shadows began to stir, heralding a moment that would forever change the fate of Ndumo. Zinel's heart pounded fiercely as the rough hands of the guards gripped her arms, dragging her through the dim corridors beneath the village granary. The air grew thick with a damp, fetid stench, a mixture of rot and decay that clawed at her throat and made her eyes water. She stumbled into a small, windowless chamber, its walls cold and covered in dark stains. The only light came from the flicker of a single torch held by one of the men, casting eerie shadows that danced like phantoms. The guards shoved her inside roughly and slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind her. The room was no larger than a storage closet, filled to the brim with the bodies of dead rats, mummified, twisted, and crawling with insects. A low, unsettling scurry echoed from the corners as a few desperate rats still clung to life in the darkness. The floor was littered with refuse, and a thick layer of grime coated every surface. Zinel swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath as waves of revulsion and fear crashed over her. The weight of the accusations that had led her here pressed heavily on her spirit. This was not just a test, it was a trial by torment, designed to break her will and prove a falsehood through suffering. The chill of the stone walls seeped into her bones as she crouched on the filthy floor, trying to avoid contact with the crawling vermin. Her skin prickled with 1,000 tiny bites, and the smell of death seemed to settle into her very soul. Yet, through the darkness, a small flame of resilience flickered within her. She whispered silent prayers to the ancestors, seeking strength and protection against the cruelty imposed upon her. Time stretched endlessly. The rats' movements grew bolder, their squeaks and scrabbles forming an unsettling chorus around her. Zinel's thoughts drifted between despair and determination. She thought of her family, the village she loved, and the injustice that had brought her to this place. Every heartbeat was a drum of defiance. Outside the chamber, the village held its breath. Some watched with grim satisfaction, certain that the darkness within the room would confirm her guilt. Others, uneasy, wondered if such cruelty could ever be justified, even in the face of fear. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to seep through cracks in the granary's stone walls. The guards prepared to open the door and reveal her fate, unaware that beyond the shadows, something unexpected was taking root, something that would challenge the very beliefs that had condemned her. Zinel's world narrowed to a dark, suffocating space as rough hands seized her from the trembling crowd. The elder's decree was absolute. She was to be locked in the chamber beneath the granary, a small room dreaded by all, where the dead rats were said to carry curses and sickness. It was a punishment designed to break the innocent and the guilty alike, a trial by terror that many never emerged from unscathed. The path to the chamber was grim. Zinel's footsteps echoed hollowly against cold stone walls as she was dragged through a narrow, twisting tunnel that smelled of mold and decay. The flickering torchlight cast grotesque shadows that seemed to claw at her with unseen fingers. Her mind raced, grappling with disbelief, fear, and a strange flicker of defiance. How could they believe she was cursed? How could they condemn her without proof? But such thoughts faded beneath the overwhelming reality of what awaited. At last, the heavy door creaked open, revealing the chamber, barely larger than a storage closet, its walls stained with grime and scars of the past. The air was thick and fetid, saturated with the stench of rot and the unmistakable musk of death. The floor was littered with bones, rat droppings, and the dried remains of rodents long dead. Live rats scurried nervously in the corners, their beady eyes reflecting the torchlight like tiny embers. Zinel was pushed inside roughly. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her bones, sealing her in darkness. Her breaths came shallow and fast, each inhale tasting of dust and decay. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall, trying to make herself as small as possible, but there was nowhere to hide. The room was claustrophobic and suffocating, filled with the relentless scurrying of rats searching for warmth in the chill. At first, terror gripped her. The rats crawled over her feet and hands, their cold bodies sending shivers through her skin. Tiny bites stung as the creatures explored, undeterred by her presence. She could feel their movement beneath her, hear the scratching and squeaking that filled the silence. It was a symphony of dread, a chorus of the forsaken. But as moments stretched into hours, something within Zinel began to change. The initial shock dulled, replaced by a steady flame of resolve. She reminded herself that this trial was not proof of guilt, but a test of faith, faith in herself and the spirits she had always believed in. Her thoughts turned inward, recalling the lessons of her mother, the prayers taught by the village elders in better times, and the strength of those who had come before her. She began to chant softly, a whispered prayer to the ancestors, seeking protection and courage. Her voice, though barely audible over the rat's restless movements, steadied her heartbeat and calmed her mind. The darkness seemed less oppressive, the foul odor more bearable. Zinel's skin bore the marks of the punishment, scratches and bites that stung like fire, but she did not cry out. She refused to give her captors the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she focused on the warmth in her chest, a growing light that no darkness could extinguish. Outside the chamber, the villagers gathered anxiously. Some prayed for her innocence, others whispered that the trial would end in tragedy. The elders waited solemnly, ready to pass judgment on the outcome. They did not know that behind the thick wooden door, something miraculous was about to unfold, a silent transformation that would defy their fears and change the fate of the village forever. Zinel's first night in the dark chamber stretched endlessly before her like a nightmare without end. The heavy wooden door thudded shut behind her, sealing her into a tomb of shadows and decay. The faint, flickering light from the torch outside was swallowed by the oppressive darkness, leaving only the low, constant sound of rats scurrying and the damp chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each inhalation tasting of dust and rot. The rats, once hesitant, grew bolder as the night deepened. Their tiny claws tapped on the stone floor, a constant, unsettling rhythm that echoed in her ears. She felt their cold bodies brush against her skin, and more than once a sharp sting from a bite sent jolts of pain coursing through her. But Zinel bit back tears, determined not to show weakness. The villagers' cruel eyes might have condemned her, but she refused to surrender to despair. In the suffocating darkness, memories flooded her mind, her mother's gentle hands smoothing her hair, the laughter of childhood friends, the warm sun on her village's fields. She clung to these images like lifelines, holding on to hope in a place where hope seemed impossible. Yet fear lurked in every corner, whispering doubts and threatening to unravel her resolve. As the hours wore on, the terror twisted into something deeper. The silence between the rats' movements became a void that echoed with the voices of the village, whispers of curses, accusations, and rejection. The weight of being branded a witch pressed down on her, crushing her spirit. But amid the suffocating gloom, a flicker of defiance sparked within her heart. Zinel closed her eyes and began to whisper a prayer, calling to the ancestors who watched over the innocent and the wronged. Her voice was barely audible, but it was enough to steady her trembling hands and calm the storm within. The dark room seemed to breathe with her, shadows shifting in rhythm with her whispered words. With each passing hour, her fear gave way to an unexpected strength. She felt a warmth spreading from her chest, a quiet fire that no amount of darkness or cruelty could extinguish. The rats, once menacing, became part of the strange silence that wrapped around her, a reminder that even in decay life persists. Though the night was long and filled with suffering, Zinel emerged from the darkness transformed. She was bruised and battered, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. The trial meant to break her had instead forged her into a beacon of resilience, ready to face whatever fate awaited beyond the heavy wooden door. As dawn's first pale light seeped through the cracks beneath the heavy wooden door, a hush fell over the village square. The elders, the curious and the fearful had gathered once again, their eyes fixed on the chamber where Zinel had been locked away through the night. Whispers fluttered like restless birds. Some doubted she would survive the cruel test, others hoped for a miracle. Minutes passed like hours as the door remained closed, its surface scarred and worn from generations of trials and punishments. Then, with a sudden creak that sliced through the morning stillness, the door swung open. Out stepped Zinel. The first thing the villagers noticed was not her presence, but the air around her, thick with a sweet, mysterious fragrance. It was the scent of myrrh, rich and warm, weaving through the cold morning air like an invisible cloak. The pungent, bitter smell of decay and death that had seeped into the chamber seemed to have been replaced, as if the darkness itself had been transformed overnight. Zinel's appearance startled everyone. Though she had endured the night in a room littered with dead rats and suffocating filth, she emerged physically unmarked, her skin unblemished, her clothes untouched by dirt or grime. Her eyes shone with a newfound light, calm and unwavering, as if the night had cleansed more than just her body. She moved with a quiet dignity, her every step measured but free from fear. Villagers who had jeered and spat at her before now recoiled, unsure whether they beheld a woman or something touched by the divine. Elders stepped forward, their faces a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The head elder, who had decreed the punishment, lowered his gaze respectfully, sensing that the trial had yielded an answer far beyond mortal judgment. Some among the crowd whispered of miracles, others murmured that the ancestors had intervened. Mothers clutched their children tightly, sensing that the winds of change were blowing through their village. Zinal raised her voice, clear and steady, to speak not of vengeance but of peace and forgiveness. She told of the darkness she had faced, the fears she had overcome, and the light that now guided her steps. Her words, carried on the fragrant air, touched even the hardest hearts. The scent of myrrh clung to her like a symbol, a reminder that even when cast into the depths of despair, the spirit could emerge fragrant, pure, and strong. From that day forward, Zinal's story was told with reverence, a living testament to resilience, transformation, and the mysterious ways in which justice and mercy can intertwine. News of Zinal's extraordinary emergence spread like wildfire, carried first by the soft murmur of the morning breeze and then by the hurried footsteps of villagers racing from home to home. From the dusty market stalls to the shadowed corners of thatched huts, every whispered word carried the weight of disbelief, awe, and fear. The village, once unified in suspicion and dread, became a hotbed of debate and division. At the center of it all was Zinal, no longer just the accused outcast but a figure who challenged the very beliefs that had cast her aside. In the crowded square, groups gathered in tight circles, voices lowered yet charged with urgency. Some elders, their faces etched with years of tradition, called it a divine miracle. They pointed to the fragrant myrrh that seemed to surround her, to the purity of her unmarked body, as undeniable proof that the ancestors had spoken and vindicated her. "This is the work of the spirits," one elderly woman declared, her eyes bright with conviction. "Zinal has been chosen to carry their message. We must listen and change." But others were not so ready to embrace this new truth. Suspicion and fear, like stubborn weeds, clung fiercely to the hearts of many. "Trickery," muttered a group of wary villagers. "Witchcraft dressed as miracle. The devil has a way of twisting what we see." Rumors began to swirl, more dangerous and venomous than before. Some whispered that Zinal had cast a spell on herself to escape punishment, that the scent of myrrh was a cunning charm, and that the rats were bewitched servants of her dark will. The village children, once eager to play near her, now kept their distance, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Even the village priests and spiritual leaders found themselves at odds, debating in hushed tones whether to bless her or to exorcise her. Amidst the chaos, Zinal remained calm, her serene presence a stark contrast to the restless crowd. She knew that miracles, real or imagined, could unite or divide, heal or destroy. But she also understood that her story was bigger than fear or suspicion. It was a call to rethink what the village believed about justice, fear, and the strength of the human spirit. As days passed, the whispers grew louder, some filled with hope, others with anger. The village stood at a crossroads, caught between old fears and the dawning possibility of change. And through it all, the scent of myrrh lingered in the air, a fragrant reminder that sometimes, the most powerful transformations come from the darkest places. The dawn light filtered softly through the woven palm fronds of the elders' meeting hut, casting long shadows over the heavy wooden table where the village's most respected leaders gathered. The air was thick, not just with the tropical heat, but with tension and uncertainty. Outside, the hum of the village life carried on as usual, but inside, the elders wrestled with a dilemma that threatened to shake the very foundations of their authority. At the center of their debate was Zinal, once the accused outcast, now a figure both revered and feared. Her miraculous survival and the mysterious scent of myrrh that clung to her like a sacred cloak had ignited a firestorm of opinions and questions among the villagers. What did this mean for their traditions? For their beliefs? For the fragile order they sought to uphold? The eldest among them, Chief Mbeki, a man whose graying beard was a symbol of wisdom and whose voice carried the weight of decades, spoke first. His tone was grave but measured. "We cannot deny what the eyes and noses tell us," he said, rubbing his hands together thoughtfully. "Zinal's survival is a sign. The myrrh that surrounds her is no ordinary scent, it is the fragrance of the ancestors, a blessing. To punish her further would be to anger the spirits themselves." Beside him, Elder Thandi shook her head, her lips pressed tightly. But chief, if we accept this, what message do we send to the village? That those accused of witchcraft can defy our laws and traditions? The balance we maintain depends on order and respect for the customs that protect us. Another elder, Kofi, younger but fiercely loyal to the village's ancient codes, leaned forward. If this is truly a miracle, then perhaps it is a test for us all. Are we ready to open our minds beyond fear? Or will we cling to suspicion until it consumes us? The conversation spiraled into heated debate. Some elders argued that Zinal should be honored, given a place among them as a living symbol of resilience and divine favor. Others feared that accepting her survival might encourage other accused witches or criminals to claim miraculous escapes, undermining the council's authority. There were whispers of consulting the village priests, seeking their interpretation of the omen. But even the priests were divided, some calling for a blessing ceremony to welcome Zinal back into the community, others urging caution and ritual purification to cleanse any lingering darkness. Outside the hut, villagers listened intently to the raised voices, their own doubts and hopes mirroring the elders' turmoil. The fate of Zinal was no longer just her own, it had become a matter of village destiny. Chief Mbeki raised his hand, silencing the room. We must decide wisely. Our people look to us for guidance, for justice, for the preservation of peace. Let us pray to the ancestors and seek their wisdom before we act. The elders bowed their heads, the heavy silence filled with unspoken fears and the weight of responsibility. In that moment they understood that the path forward was uncertain, balancing justice with mercy, tradition with change, fear with hope. Zinal's fate, and perhaps the future of the village itself, hung in the balance. The village square buzzed with restless murmurs as the day of reckoning arrived. Villagers gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and cautious hope. Among them stood Zinal, poised and calm, her presence commanding despite the heavy weight of accusation and doubt that still lingered in the air. The fragrance of myrrh seemed to envelope her, a quiet but unmistakable aura that set her apart from the crowd. Though many eyes darted nervously toward her, some filled with fear, others with resentment, Zinal held her head high. The past weeks of torment, isolation, and whispered rumors had not broken her spirit. Instead, they had forged within her a deep well of strength, grounded in truth and an unwavering belief in the power of forgiveness. When the village elder finally beckoned her forward to speak, a hush fell over the crowd. Zinal stepped into the center, her voice steady but warm, reaching every corner of the square. I know why many fear me, she began. I carry the weight of suspicion, the burden of stories told in shadows and whispers. But I stand before you not as a curse or a shadow, but as a living testament to what happens when fear controls our hearts. She paused, letting her words sink in, her eyes meeting those of villagers who had once spat upon her doorstep or cast stones in her path. Truth is a flame that no darkness can extinguish. It burns through lies and superstition, revealing what is real and just. I do not ask you to forget the past, but to remember that fear often blinds us to the light of understanding. Some villagers shifted uneasily, but others nodded slowly, the spark of empathy igniting within their eyes. Forgiveness, Zinal continued, is not a sign of weakness but of courage. It frees both the forgiven and the forgiver. I forgive those who cast me out, not to erase what happened, but to heal the wounds that divide us. Her words hung in the air, a balm to the village's fractured soul. The scent of myrrh seemed to grow stronger, weaving through the crowd like a gentle wind, softening hardened hearts. An old woman stepped forward, tears glistening. You speak with the wisdom of the ancestors, child. Perhaps it is time we listen, truly listen, and let go of the fears that have ruled us. Others murmured agreements, their voices blending into a chorus of tentative hope. Zinal smiled gently, her calm defiance not a challenge but an invitation, an offer of peace, healing, and the chance to rewrite the story of their village together. In that moment, suspicion began to dissolve, replaced by a shared understanding that sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in punishment or fear, but in the quiet power of truth and forgiveness. The air in the village was thick with change, subtle at first but undeniable. For years, fear had cast a long shadow over the lives of the villagers, dictating their actions, breeding suspicion and isolating Zinal as a pariah. Yet, after her calm defiance and the mysterious scent of myrrh that lingered around her, something inside the hearts of the people began to shift. It was a turning point, one that would ripple through the village and slowly dismantle the walls of prejudice brick by brick. At the heart of this transformation was the silent power of reflection. Many villagers found themselves replaying old memories, questioning the stories and beliefs that had so long dictated their judgment of Zinel. The whispers of fear that once drowned her name now began to give way to curiosity, and then to tentative respect. Elders who had once been steadfast in their condemnation started to meet in smaller circles, quietly debating what they had witnessed and what it meant for their community. Some admitted their own doubts, voices tinged with humility and regret. The tale of Zinel's survival, coupled with the inexplicable fragrance she carried, was a living testimony that the old fears might have been misplaced. Among the younger villagers, conversations buzzed with a new energy. They approached Zinel cautiously at first, offering small gestures of kindness, a shared meal, a helping hand, a smile that had been long withheld. The children, once taught to avoid her, now gathered near her, fascinated by her gentle spirit and the stories she told about courage and resilience. Their laughter, once absent from her presence, became a melody of hope. Zinel herself remained a pillar of grace and patience. She never rushed the villagers' change of heart, understanding that healing took time. Instead, she continued to engage with the community, offering her wisdom and kindness freely. She helped tend the fields, assisted with healing the sick using herbs passed down from her mother, and shared lessons of forgiveness and strength that resonated deeply with those who listened. One significant moment came when a young mother, whose child had fallen ill, sought Zinel's aid. Despite lingering doubts from some villagers, the mother's desperate plea was met with Zinel's unwavering compassion. Through careful care and ancient remedies, the child recovered. Word of this spread quickly, turning the tide further in Zinel's favor. It became a powerful symbol. The one who was once feared now brought life and healing. Slowly, traditions that once excluded her began to change. The village's gatherings included Zinel's presence, and elders invited her to share wisdom alongside them. The story of the girl locked away among dead rats who emerged smelling of myrrh transformed from a tale of suspicion into a legend of endurance and grace. Yet, change was not without resistance. Some villagers clung to old beliefs, whispering in shadows, fearful of what the future held. They warned that embracing Zinel might bring misfortune or anger the spirits. But even these voices grew quieter as more witnessed the beauty of forgiveness and unity blossoming within the village. In time, Zinel's name became synonymous not with curses or fear, but with hope and renewal. The village, once fractured by suspicion, began to knit itself together with threads of empathy and understanding. Walls were torn down and bridges built. The turning point marked more than just the acceptance of one woman. It signaled the rebirth of a community, the triumph of courage over fear, and the enduring power of truth and forgiveness. And at the heart of it all stood Zinel, a living testament to the idea that even in the darkest moments, light can find its way through, illuminating paths toward healing and peace. The village had transformed. What was once a place shadowed by fear and suspicion now pulsed with renewed life, hope and unity, all inspired by Zinel's unwavering courage and resilience. The story of the girl locked in a room of dead rats, emerging unharmed and fragrant with myrrh, had become more than a whispered legend. It had blossomed into a beacon that illuminated the hearts and minds of every villager. The scent of myrrh lingered not only around Zinel herself but had woven its way into the very fabric of village life, becoming a powerful symbol of hope, healing, and spiritual renewal. Myrrh, once associated with sacred rituals and protection, now represented the triumph of truth over fear, the strength found in compassion, and the courage to stand tall in the face of injustice. In the early mornings, as the sun's golden light spilled over the hills, villagers would breathe deeply, recalling the fragrance that had changed their world. Mothers told their children the tale of Zinel, the girl who endured cruelty and emerged with a gift not just of fragrance but of profound inner strength. Children played beneath the acacia trees, their laughter a new song of freedom, echoing the resilience that had come to define their home. Zinel herself had become a pillar of the community. She took on the role of healer and guide, using her knowledge of herbs and natural remedies to help the sick and weary. The village elders, once divided and doubtful, now sought her counsel on matters of dispute and guidance, respecting her wisdom and steady heart. Even those who had been her harshest critics found themselves humbled by her gentle forgiveness and unwavering dedication to the village's well-being. The transformation extended beyond Zinel's presence. The village embraced new traditions that celebrated unity, courage, and forgiveness. Annual gatherings were held where the story of Zinel's trial and triumph was shared around the fire, inspiring each generation to face their fears and support one another. The scent of burning myrrh resin became a ritual, a reminder that even in darkness, light and hope could flourish. Economically and socially, the village began to thrive. The change in attitude fostered a stronger sense of cooperation, and with Zinal's help, agricultural practices improved and healthcare advanced. Visitors from neighboring villages came to witness the miraculous garden of goodwill that had grown from one woman's resilience, spreading the tale far and wide. Yet, Zinal remained humble. She often retreated to quiet moments beneath the baobab tree, reflecting on how far she had come and the power of forgiveness. The pain she endured had shaped her, but it had never defined her. Her heart remained open, ready to heal and uplift. Her journey taught the village that true strength was not in cruelty or exclusion but in kindness, understanding, and the courage to face adversity with grace. The fragrance of myrrh was no longer just a scent, it was the soul of a community reborn. As seasons turned and years passed, the village thrived in harmony. The legacy of Zinal's courage endured, passed down as a story of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of faith in oneself and one's community. The myrrh that once mysteriously scented her emergence from darkness now scented every celebration, every healing, and every act of kindness. In this new light, the villagers learned that even the deepest wounds could be healed, that fear could be overcome, and that the spirit of one brave soul could awaken the heart of an entire community. And so, the village stood, not as a place of suspicion and fear, but as a testament to the enduring power of courage, forgiveness, and hope. The scent of myrrh would forever remind them of Zinal's journey from darkness into light, inspiring generations to come. The days after Zinal's miraculous emergence from the dark, rat-infested room were unlike any the village had ever seen. The initial shock and fear began to mingle with confusion, and slowly, a subtle shift took root in the hearts of those who had once viewed her only with suspicion and dread. The scent of myrrh that clung to her like a halo became a quiet reminder that something extraordinary had happened, something that could not be easily ignored or explained away. For many villagers, the fear they had carried was ancient, woven into their traditions and fueled by stories passed down through generations. The belief that Zinal was cursed or a witch was deeply ingrained, tied to superstition and a desire to protect the community from unseen threats. But now, with her survival and the strange fragrance that surrounded her, the very foundation of those beliefs began to tremble. The elders, who had once been unanimous in their call for harsh punishment, found themselves divided. Some clung stubbornly to old fears, wary of any sign that challenged their authority or the traditions they upheld. Others, however, started to question whether justice had been served, and whether their fear had blinded them to truth and compassion. In the marketplace, conversations shifted. The usual murmurs of suspicion were replaced by whispers of awe and curiosity. Children, who had been taught to avoid Zinal at all costs, now glanced at her with wonder rather than disdain. The youngest among them, unburdened by prejudice, began to approach her cautiously, their innocent curiosity breaking the ice of fear. One morning, a woman named Nokuthala, known for her wisdom and kindness, approached Zinal's small hut at the edge of the village. Nokuthala had been one of Zinal's harshest critics before the ordeal, convinced that she brought misfortune. But now, seeing Zinal's calm strength and the healing aura that seemed to surround her, Nokuthala felt compelled to change her mind. With a gentle smile, Nokuthala offered Zinal a basket of fresh fruit and herbs, a traditional gesture of goodwill and reconciliation. "I was wrong," she said softly, her eyes shining with sincerity. "You have shown us that fear can be defeated, and that strength comes in many forms." Zinal accepted the gift with humility, her heart swelling with hope. This simple act marked a turning point, a crack in the wall of mistrust that had divided the village. Word of Nokuthala's gesture spread quickly, encouraging others to follow her example. Slowly but surely villagers began to visit Zinal, seeking her counsel and offering apologies for past cruelties. She welcomed them with open arms, never holding grudges but instead sharing her wisdom about forgiveness and understanding. In the days that followed, Zinal's knowledge of healing herbs became invaluable. She tended to the sick and wounded, her gentle hands and kind words soothing more than just physical ailments. Her presence brought comfort and reassurance, and even the most skeptical villagers could not deny the positive changes she inspired. A young boy named Tabo, who had been sickly for months, was among her first patients. His mother, initially hesitant, entrusted him to Zinal's care after hearing of her miraculous survival and healing abilities. Within weeks, Tabo's strength returned, and his laughter filled the village once more. Such stories multiplied, transforming Zinal's image from that of an outcast to a beloved healer and protector. The village began to see her not as a source of fear, but as a beacon of hope and renewal. Yet, change was not without resistance. A small faction of villagers, led by a man named Mthembu, remained vocal in their distrust. They warned that Zinal's survival and the scent of myrrh were signs of darker forces at work. Nthembu's words stirred old fears, threatening to undo the fragile progress the village had made. But even Nthembu could not deny the growing support for Zinal. As more villagers embraced her, his influence waned. The elders convened once more, this time with a different purpose: to reconsider their judgment and seek a path toward healing and unity. In a solemn gathering under the ancient baobab tree, the elders debated late into the night. Some spoke of tradition and caution, while others advocated for compassion and change. After hours of discussion, a consensus emerged. Zinal would no longer be seen as cursed, but as a symbol of resilience and hope. The elders publicly acknowledged their mistake, offering a formal apology to Zinal and the community. This act of humility and reconciliation was met with applause and tears, signaling a new chapter in the village's history. Zinal's role in the village evolved from outcast to leader. She taught the people about the dangers of fear and prejudice, encouraging them to embrace empathy and courage. Her story became a powerful lesson, reminding all that true strength lies in kindness and understanding. Over time, the village flourished. The fields grew greener, the people healthier, and the community stronger. The scent of myrrh became a cherished symbol, woven into celebrations and rituals that honored Zinal's journey and the village's transformation. Children learned to sing songs of hope inspired by her story, and elders shared tales of courage and forgiveness around the fire. The legacy of fear gave way to a legacy of love, resilience, and unity. Through it all, Zinal remained humble, grateful for the chance to heal not only bodies but hearts. Her quiet strength inspired generations, and the village remembered that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope and courage can shine through. The turning point was more than just a change in perception. It was a rebirth of the village's soul, forever shaped by one woman's unwavering spirit and the healing power of compassion. The days following the elder's apology were unlike anything the village of Ndlovu had ever known. The air itself seemed to shift, carrying with it a newfound sense of peace and possibility. For years, fear and suspicion had woven through the fabric of their lives, threading dark shadows over every interaction. But now, with Zinal's courage and the miracle of the myrrh scent still lingering in their memories, those shadows began to lift, revealing a light the village had long forgotten. From the moment the elders formally recognized Zinal's innocence and embraced her as a leader, a remarkable transformation unfolded, not only in how people treated her but in how they saw themselves and their community. The deep-rooted fear that had once held them captive loosened its grip, replaced by an awakening to the power of resilience, kindness, and shared humanity. Zinal's small hut, once isolated and avoided by most, became a place of gathering and learning. Villagers of all ages came seeking her wisdom, not just about herbs and healing but about courage and forgiveness. Her quiet presence, marked by humility and unwavering strength, inspired those around her to look beyond superstition and embrace compassion. One early morning, as the sun cast a golden glow over the thatched rooftops, Zinal stood outside her hut surrounded by children eager to learn about the healing plants that grew wild nearby. She showed them how to identify aloe for soothing burns, how to harvest marula leaves for fevers, and how the bark of the baobab tree could heal wounds. The children listened intently, their eyes bright with curiosity, absorbing not only knowledge but a sense of empowerment. Among them was little Ao, a shy boy who had often been sickly and withdrawn. He reached out timidly to touch a leaf Zinal held, and she smiled warmly, encouraging him gently. "Nature provides if we learn to listen," she told the group. "And so does the strength inside each of you." Word of Zinal's teachings spread beyond the village borders, drawing visitors from neighboring communities curious to witness the miracle that had rekindled hope in Ndlovu. Some came skeptical but few left unchanged. The scent of myrrh, now carried by the breeze and woven into stories told around evening fires, became a symbol, a fragrant reminder that even the darkest trials could birth healing and renewal. As the seasons passed, the village's fields, once parched and struggling, blossomed with abundance. Farmers credited the change to new practices Zinal helped introduce, inspired by her patient study of nature and cycles of growth. The harvest grew plentiful, and the market thrived with fresh fruits, grains, and herbs. Joy and laughter returned to places where silence and fear had ruled. The village's newfound harmony extended to its people. Old grievances dissolved as neighbors reached out to one another with apologies and open hearts. Families once divided by suspicion reunited, their bonds strengthened by the shared journey from darkness to light. Zinal's example of forgiveness taught them the power of releasing pain and choosing love instead. One evening, during a celebration of the harvest moon, the villagers gathered beneath the sprawling branches of the ancient baobab tree, the very spot where the elders had once judged Zinal. Now that space was filled with music, dancing, and the scent of burning myrrh wood in the fire pits. The atmosphere was electric with hope and gratitude. As drums beat a steady rhythm, Zinal stepped forward, her simple dress glowing in the firelight. The villagers watched in reverence as she raised her hands and began to sing a soft melody, an ancient song of healing and renewal passed down from the ancestors. Her voice, once silenced by fear and cruelty, now carried across the night sky, a beacon of light for all. The scent of myrrh mingled with the warm air, wrapping around each person like a blessing. Children danced with joy, elders nodded in quiet approval, and even the skeptical felt their hearts soften. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations, a celebration not only of the harvest but of the village's rebirth. As the night deepened, the village elder, now aged and wise beyond words, approached Zinal. "You have taught us that courage is the seed from which hope grows," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "Your spirit has healed us all." Zinal bowed her head, her heart full. "We all have light within," she replied softly. "Sometimes it takes the darkest nights to see it shine." In the months and years that followed, the village continued to flourish. The legend of Zinal's ordeal and her miraculous survival became woven into the fabric of their culture. Mothers told the story to their children as a lesson in bravery. Teachers used it to inspire young minds to question fear and embrace understanding. And the scent of myrrh, forever tied to Zinal's name, became a sacred symbol of healing, burned in ceremonies, carried in sachets, and planted in the hearts of all. Zinal herself grew into a respected leader, not through titles or power, but through the quiet strength of her actions. She helped establish a small healing center, where people could come for comfort and care. She worked alongside the elders to build bridges with neighboring villages, spreading the message of compassion and unity. Her humility remained, even as her influence grew. She never forgot the loneliness of those first days after the accusations, and she dedicated herself to ensuring no one in Lovu would ever again suffer in silence or isolation. One afternoon, as she walked through the village market, children ran to greet her with flowers and songs. Young mothers thanked her for teaching them to tend their children's ailments with gentle hands. Farmers showed her their bountiful crops, and elders nodded with pride at the harmony that now reigned. Looking out over the thriving village, Zinal felt a deep peace. The journey had been long and hard, but the light they had found together was brighter than any darkness could ever extinguish. The scent of myrrh still lingered on the breeze, an enduring reminder that courage, kindness, and resilience could transform even the most fearful hearts, and that hope, once kindled, could light the way for generations to come.